Welcome, Richard. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. As always, we like to begin all things by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as our ancestors who toiled without compassion or compensation, and all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build and share and learn together for our collective liberation. So I just want to start off by having you introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
So my name is Richard Sharpe. I'm currently the director of the Black Equity Branch at the Treasury Board Secretariat in the Ontario Public Service.
That's
I'm a,
great. Mhm.
you want to, I can go on more. I'm a longtime public servant. Just joined the Ontario Public Service in November or January of 2023. Was a federal public servant for about 27 years before I made the jump over to the OPS. Done a lot of work in the space of anti-racism, anti-Black racism, supporting things like the UN Decade for People of African Descent and all the things that flow from that with respects to education, policing, healthcare, and so on. Anything that touches the Black community, I've had a little bit of a hand in over the course of my years in this space.
Well, we applaud your work over the years then for sure and appreciate that. Can you share what your personal mission and vision is?
Oh, my personal mission and vision. Oh, wow. I guess it's to make sure that my time on this planet is supporting the advancement and the well-being and the sort of better future outcomes for people of African descent on this planet, in my country, in my society, in my family. It's really about pushing to create these outcomes that will help us to address this generational slide that we experience here in Canada, most specifically, and use what gifts I have to be able to promote and co-create these things that affect some meaningful systemic and institutional change. So that's in a nutshell. That's what I'm all about.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. So, can you tell us about the origin of your work and how you're disrupting multiple ecosystems here in Canada?
Oh wow, the origin of my work. I think we got to go back to the days of slavery in Canada in the 1800s, and then that moved into so-called emancipation, Jim Crow segregation in this country up until, let's say, the 60s. And then my parents arriving, giving us an opportunity to have a better life. I was born in London, Ontario, treated like an immigrant, I think, for most of my life, and realizing that these injustices are not just things that are individual one-off acts of racism, but this country is founded on it. And so for me, the origins of the work is addressing that in a meaningful way. I've watched my father destroyed by this place, my mother underemployed, my brothers and sisters struggling to find work and even to get a proper education because of who they are. And so somehow I've achieved some degree of success, and I'm giving back. I'm used a number of what I call policy instruments to support the foundation of this work, and in terms of the necessity and the drive to make it happen. There's things like the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It says that everybody needs to ensure substantive equality. Human rights legislation. In the federal government, we've had employment equity legislation to ensure that workers are treated fairly and have equitable opportunities to advancement and to be able to work in an environment that's free of racism and demonstrations of white supremacy. And maybe one of the things that has really driven me since 2018, when the government endorsed the UN International Decade for people of African descent. So that's been the principal policy driver that that has been the focus of my work, and it's been the thing that I've been able to push through at the federal level, myself and others, to achieve results for specifically Black Canadians. So under the umbrella of the UN decade that speaks to recognition, justice, and development, it gives us that sort of springboard, that background to be able to drive for changes that includes the support of the Canadian government.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. How important is social innovation in your work?
I think social innovation is critically important for this work because without it, you know, the work doesn't move, right? So if we look at where things have stalled in the anti-racism front, addressing anti-Black racism, it's always within existing institutions and their structures that are designed to maintain status quo, maintain the hegemony of whiteness in this country. And so what social innovation, social media, this new age of the digital age allows control and access of information to be in the hands of the every man, woman, and person. And so when you're innovating in that space, you're able to circumvent, if not augment and improve how information is shared, how people think, how people access information and knowledge, share skills and expertise, and how to tackle this big beast of anti-Black racism. So I think it's critical. I don't think that governments actually are the ones that will help us to save the world. It will be that kid in his basement and working on his code for some virtual reality thing that touches on people in a way that is real enough and impactful enough that it gets people to move to support change. So I think that's partly why people want to regulate that stuff so much, because in the hands of people who want to affect change, it can be pretty powerful, from flash mobs to organizing protests to, influencing how people think about a particular issue, global or local, right? So it's really, really critical. I think it is definitely the future. Also, when I retire, some young people are going to be taking up this work in a much different way than I did. Social innovation is probably going to be at the underpinning of all the work that they'll be doing.
You sound really optimistic about the future of AI and innovation in this space.
I am. It just so happens I was just in a meeting in the OPS about talking about AI. So of course I raised the flag about the existential threat that it poses to Black and Brown Indigenous people in this country and on this planet, when algorithms are being used to decide whether or not you can go into a store, or whether or not you should be pulled over, or whether you should be hired for a job. Like that could push us even further back than where we are now, partly because those tools, those algorithms, you want to call that, are built mostly by white people who have their values kind of entrenched and infused into these tools. So I'm optimistic, because the conversation I just had in the Ontario government is about infusing a Black inclusion lens into our development of potential regulatory frameworks to govern how we use AI. So AI can be less racist or anti-racist, which would be preferable, and that we don't end up having some of the societal problems down the road that are going to be exacerbated by the use of that kind of technology. So I'm pretty optimistic, because we're having the conversation. There are people that are aware of it, but I feel like from my vantage point, we're going to be at the vanguard of some of that work for government, from the perspective of applying a Black lens, a Black inclusion lens, so that we're not continually being left behind in terms of the rollout of this incredibly powerful technology.
It's so true, the way that you broke that down, and then and necessary changes to make, like you said, the technology anti-racist. And it's only as good as, the programmers. Like you said, if it's typically a non-inclusive team, I think I read about an example of that when they first released the self-driving cars, and that in the development, the way that you train it for safety is to show it a bunch of images. Now, if you only show it images of white people, it only identifies white people as humans, and we should stop. And so I think people can ignorantly just overlook that sort of, simple insight to, you need to show diversity, you need to show a variety. Um, right. So it's just like, I mean, self-driving sounds cool, but when you don't understand everything that went into the programming, then that's where it becomes scary and you can't trust it. So thank you for
Mhm.
touching on that. And like I said, that's all the reason why your work is so important. um, Now, what inspires you most about your current role in the community?
What inspires me most? I think my kids inspire me most because we're going to leave this place to them. And I can see that they are struggling. My kids and other children are struggling to find their place in a society where, as Black children, they're still not wanted or accepted. So that's sort of my specific inspiration is that I'm also inspired by the ancestors, people that came before me. My bloodline, in Jamaica, Sam Sharpe was the revolutionary down there, and apparently we're related. Although I don't know how far back, but that gives me a lot of inspiration, knowing that this is in my blood, that we are here to make things better for our peoples, which means we resist oppression in all of its forms. And I got, I guess, a little bit of intellect and capacity to talk, and that helps get me in trouble and also helps to persuade people sometimes to act in a way that's in accordance with laws, regulations, and just the right thing to do. So, kids and my history, our history as Black people, that's very inspiring. And I also know the future of this planet is Black. So, when you have all of those three things, it's kind of feels sometimes a bit, unstoppable in terms of being able to affect change in real time.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. What challenges or barriers do you face in your work, and how are you and your team working to overcome them right now?
So barriers to the work, it's always kind of the same thing. So there's sort of basic lack of understanding as to why it's important that we focus on addressing anti-Black racism. I think that there's this fallacy within our society that we should all just get along, and that equity is equity, and that we shouldn't have a particular focus on Black. So a lot of our work, some of our work has been around making sure that we have the data to basically make the case for the work that we do. So disaggregated race-based data, disaggregated socio-demographic data, whatever you want to call it, but the data that says is how many Black people you have here, and how many white people and other racialized groups, and this is what their experience is. So one of the challenges of addressing this sort of constant questioning and justification is that sometimes the data isn't always that good. So we have to do our part to make sure that we're able to source good data. Data is the foundation of all actions and decisions that organizations make. So if you don't have good data, then you can't possibly be in a position to make good decisions about programming initiatives, doing an assessment on the impacts of the things that we do in our society in terms of everything from policing to medical care, education. If you don't have good data to see who's being potentially disproportionately impacted by how those policies are being applied, then it makes it really difficult for you to continue to make the justification for that work. So that's probably one of the biggest things for me is the data. And so as we spend a lot of time working with folks internal to the OPS, but also with the federal government, Statistics Canada, and others who have this demographic data in order for us to translate that into things that people understand and that we can work with. What's the workforce look like? How many people being incarcerated? What do they look like, right? Can we break it down by region? So those kinds of things are important because, what's happening in Thunder Bay is not the same thing that's happening downtown Toronto. It's not happening what's happening in other parts of the country. So we need to understand sort of data from a regional perspective, as localized as possible. So yeah, it's for me the big thing is being able to acquire good and useful data to support the work that we do.
Right. And I'm glad that you touched on how important, the correct data is, of course, necessary and where to pull it from. Uh, do you have a key set of priorities that you're working on right now that you'd like to highlight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everywhere I go, I try to pull together an intrepid team of folks. Right now, I'm doing a Black equity branch. I'm running a Black equity branch, so I got all these Black folk who are professionals, multidisciplinary professionals. And once we have them, and took some time to amass them from within the OPS, we're putting something in place called an anti-Black racism results framework. So this is the first priority is to establish this framework, which is an outcome-driven, metrics-filled, accountability-focused plan, strategy, approach, tool that we use to frame all the work that we're doing that focuses on systemic change or institutional impact within the organization to address anti-Black racism. So that's the first one. I do have other priorities in terms of some of the work that I do outside of the OPS with respect to supporting work of the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, engaging with civil society groups to ensure that we are contributing to writing and crafting an international declaration on the rights of people of African descent. That would be huge to have sort of a legal international document that we can bring back to Canada, much the same way that we did for globally for the Indigenous population by putting in place the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Persons. We could have a similar UN binding document or a document that encourages member states, including Canada, to support specific initiatives to address anti-Black racism and to promote substantive equality for Black people in this country in a meaningful and substantive way, more so than we do now. So in terms of my two main priorities, one is to develop that framework within the OPS, just a multitude of 30 plus initiatives focused on addressing anti-Black racism within the OPS over the next 3 years, and then working with national and international partners on this international declaration on the rights of people of African descent. I think that when we have those kinds of things, again, we have sort of more policy cover to be able to drive substantive change at multiple levels, on the ground, in organizations, and from the legal perspective, regulatory changes that would support, again, improving the lot of Black people in this country.
That's great. How do you feel about the future of Black leadership in Canada?
The future of Black leadership is good because we're all of us that have been in the game for a long time are getting old, and we're going to have to sit down and let young people them come up and do their thing. I think that there's a generational divide to some extent in terms of what we thought we understood about Black leadership in Canada and what is actually the reality. I actually think that I do think that we always need to recognize when our time is done in the leadership space, and we should be doing everything in our power to engage in succession planning so the next generation of people that come behind us, that come to replace us, have what they need, have the support, have the knowledge, the that we pass on the experiences that we've had, so they don't have to make all of the same kinds of mistakes that we did when we were trying to come up the ranks. And I think the young people who are coming in are in some ways way more advanced technologically, emotionally, spiritually to some extent, trying to find their ways than we were, and that so my view of the future is that it's bright. And if we're successful in doing some of the things that we're trying to do, like I know that not everybody in the Black leadership space is all working in the same direction or even working on the same team, quite frankly. Those of us who are not in the pockets of corporations or governments per se are working at sort of multiple levels to make sure that people have voice and they're able to contribute to what a future Canada looks like, where we're not so much having these same conversations over and over again, that we're actually just talking about how we progress as peoples, and not that we're addressing racism or trying to overcome barriers and that sort of thing. So I think that young people are more and more closer to that. When I say that, I'm also very optimistic because like I was saying at the beginning, I've seen what the future looks like in Canada and the rest of the world. Right now, 10% of the planet are Black from sub-Saharan Africa. Within 30, 50 years, it's going to be 25%. And so all those people are going to be spreading across the globe. And guess who the largest group of people that are coming into Canada are? 500,000. Just last week, they upped the number of people that could immigrate to this country to 500,000 people. And so one of the largest groups coming into this country from the African continent, French-speaking, Black people, English, multiple languages, skills, abilities. So this country is going to change dramatically from a demographic standpoint. So whether or not people are like it or not, Black people are going to be moving into leadership positions, into all kinds of positions, and supporting the growth, economic and other growth of this country. So it's good to start preparing from now for something that's going to happen in 15, 20 years. And that will make it easier for people from a policy perspective and from a social perspective when that change comes. We're seeing the resistance to that, especially in the United States, because they're changing faster. I think they've passed that delta. I think more than 50% of the United States is not white. So we're not there yet, but we will be. And so are we going to see the same kind of pushback from people who are afraid of that change, or are we going to embrace it? Are we going to be this sort of multicultural society that the legislation says that we are? Or are we going to be dealing with sort of resistance to change? So I'm big on change. I think change is good. And so as it pertains to leadership who are ready to adjust to that change and be led by, like servant leadership, to be led by the people, as opposed to being the ruler of the people, then I think we'll be all right. I think we'll be all right.
Very interesting. What is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like to you and your colleagues?
Well, success looks like I'm out of a job. Success looks like you don't need someone like me leading a Black equity branch, because Black equity or Black inclusion is already infused into governments, into organizations, into education, into policing, not just superficial stuff, not just having leaders or police officers or doctors, but the way you think, the way this place thinks, has in its mind or has on the table, what about Black people? What about Indigenous people? What about people who are trans, LGBTQ plus? What about, and are we including these people in a way that's meaningful, these experiences, this reality in a way that's meaningful? If we get to that place, then I can retire and I can sit on that beach and I can watch my kids play, my grandkids play. I know that we'll be fine, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. It might be a couple of generations from now, but I think we're well on the path to that. That was the gift that Floyd's life gave us, is that we're never going to truly go back to the way it used to be. So that means that we're now very much, as society, as much as people may want to resist, live to the reality that Black people are part of this, the social framework. We will contribute more to this country than ever before. And that means we need to be included in a way that is not being overrepresented in prisons, underrepresented in some boardrooms, overrepresented in sort of low health outcomes, overrepresented in places where there's like poor mental health and that sort of thing. Like we want to make sure that that's a thing of the past, and that if we're reducing it, my motto is that if we're reducing negative outcomes for Black and Indigenous peoples, then everybody will benefit. That's the way it's always been in this country. But when we go about taking this all lives matter approach to policy, diversity, inclusion, illusion approach to this stuff, then what ends up happening is that we're invariably left behind, and the outcomes not only don't get better, they get worse. So for me, the future, like I said, there's no need for someone like me. Like we're just doing this. We don't see the disproportionate disparities of outcomes, life outcomes for Black people, that everybody has pretty much a fair chance at life, at housing, at employment, and that sort of thing. And that we are focusing our attention on the really big challenges of our times, right? The environment, the economy that is designed to ensure we have homeless and people who can't purchase homes. Like these are should be the big things that we focus our attention on, not the interpersonal stuff that we end up having to deal with in terms of racism, discrimination, exclusion, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so very true. I love how you laid that out. I think we've had about 3 people answer that way, that a perfect world, I wouldn't need to be doing this job. It would already be happening. So I love that. Do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our community?
Yes, so calls to action. So I have 2. So for people who don't like to fill out surveys, and this is for my colleagues in various governments, it's important for you to fill out these surveys and self-identify as Black or brown or whatever, because we need that information to be able to guide and direct our work. You don't fill out that information, either you show up as white or you don't show up at all. And then we can't focus on addressing those issues. With respects to globally, I would encourage people to take a little bit of time to look at the UN website, or even the Black Canadian, Black Civil Society Coalition's website, and look up what's being done with respects to supporting the UN International Decade for People of African Descent. Look to see what we're doing at the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, and recognize that this is critically important for people within the African diaspora here in Canada and around the world. Call to action is to make yourself informed, and where possible, get involved, support the work wherever you can, because this will set the underpinnings and the foundation for a new sort of future for people on this planet, Black people on this planet, where rights and, like I said, better outcomes are basically the norm. So those would be my two thoughts: support data collection and support the work of under the UN International Decade for People of African Descent.
Two very practical calls to action. I think that when you started off with just filling out surveys accurately, it's dead on. I think a lot of people in the community feel like sometimes it's going to work against them. They're resistant to share. Is it going to blow back? Is it, just not going to be beneficial to them personally or to the Black community. But you've really explained why it is important to fill it in. It's very supportive in showing the impact in our community or where they need to allocate more funding and resources to our community. So appreciate you highlighting that. A really great insights. Again, we want to just champion the work that you're doing, the remarkable work you're doing in the community and in your role. And again, thank you for taking the time to share your insights and do this interview with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we're just going to close the way we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're both on, as well as our ancestors and the elders in the community, all the community stalwarts whose shoulders that we continue to stand on as we build and share together for our collective liberation. So thank you again, Richard, and thank you to our viewers and listeners.
All right. Thank you. Bye for now.